Estate disputes and prenuptial agreements. Examination in chief and cross-examination of Irwin Schmata.
This court is in session. This court calls the next witness, Mr. Irwin Schmata. Sir, please raise your left hand. Would you like to swear or affirm?
Affirm.
Do you solemnly affirm not to give the truth and to testify falsely in nothing but an entertaining manner?
No truth here, absolutely.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Schmata.
Good morning.
With your permission, during the course of our examination this morning, I'd like to call you Irwin.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you. Irwin, can you tell me a little bit about your parents' family?
Yeah, we were very close family. I mean, my father, Oliver Shalom, was a survivor. He family man, but also a family businessman. And he devoted everything to Schmata Mart. And my mother, Oliver Shalom, also just the backbone and pillar of our family, you know, raised us, took care of us, and worked with my father on examining the Schmatas. It's a serious business, the Schmata business.
I understand you have a sister?
Yeah, Zelda. Yes, absolutely. Zelda, I mean, she's taken over the business. I mean, the Schmatas, you should see these Schmatas. We've got silk now. Silk Schmatas. No more polyester.
Are you married, sir?
Yes.
And do you and your wife have any children?
Yes, we do. We do have a child, Shmulik, named after my father, Samuel or Shmuel. And, you know, he's had his difficulties, but yes.
Well, what do you mean by his difficulties?
He unfortunately, he has a very specific syndrome which prevents him from being silent, and he's constantly talking, and we've had to take him to numerous therapists. I mean, he just doesn't sleep, and he talks about Schmata. So we're trying to, he wants to be in the business. I'm trying to talk him out of the business, but Schmatas, I don't know.
I understand that you're a lawyer, sir. Is that correct?
Unfortunately.
And your area of practice?
Well, yes, matrimonial litigation, family law.
How many years were your parents married?
Over 40.
How would you describe their marriage?
It was a very close marriage. I mean, my father, after the war, he was a survivor. He saw my mother off the boat when they entered Canada, and it was love at first sight. I mean, they were deeply, deeply devoted to one another, and I mean, it was a beautiful family, a conservative family, very traditional values. I mean, you know, we weren't Shomer Shabbat, but we were traditional, and I've become a bit more religious. But yeah, I mean, it was what you'd expect from a, you know, they close, always Friday nights, always had dinner together. We still had dinner up into our mother's very untimely death, and I mean, what can I say? They were great Shabbos dinners.
Sir, I understand that your father passed away in February of 2009. Can you tell me about his estate?
Yes, he named my late mother, we loved her dearly, she named her as estate trustee. Zelda and I were the alternates. She got everything under the will, but there was a gift over in the event she had predeceased Dad. And me and Zelda were equal beneficiaries. You know, we've been just very surprised with all of this in these proceedings because it's very clear to me what both our dad and mom wanted.
What do you mean by that, sir?
Well, you know, our mother wanted Schmata Mart, the business that my dad and my mother and my sister and I worked with in ungodly hours. They wanted us to have the business. They wanted us to have the shares. They wanted us to get the assets in the estate. And quite frankly, I'm just shocked. I'm shocked at what's gone on here.
Sir, you understand that this is a claim that's being brought by Richard Schmier?
Schmier, all right.
And when did you first meet Mr. Schmier?
You know, so I just want to give you an idea of what's happened here. So my father dies February 13, 2009. You know, it's a very sad day. My mother was just a shell of herself. I mean, just a shell of herself. Wasn't talking, was just eating constantly. There was lots of stress, lack of communication, and so she wanted to go on a cruise. She called it a weight loss cruise to cheer her up. I think Mr. Schmierer referred to it in his testimony, but yeah, I mean, we were hoping that this cruise would kind of turn the page. She had, just not been talking, was pale, so sad. I had never seen my mother like this in her entire life. And so she went on this cruise, and we were ecstatic. We thought, this would be the time for her to turn the page in a positive way. And then she came back with him. And I don't know what happened after that. I mean, have you seen the guy's Facebook page?
What do you mean by that, sir? I haven't seen his Facebook page.
I mean, there are women on there. I was blown away at this. So this man is a soccer player. My mother was 65 at the time, and he's 40, this world-renowned soccer player, goalie, I guess. And he's in this Lamborghini with a bunch of women. I was ready to call the police how young these women were. And
what's the address for that? What's the website?
It was somewhere in Los Angeles. I was a bit worried. I didn't look into that. I was just I was verklempt.
When did you and your sister have your first opportunity to meet Mr. Schmier?
So upon our mother arriving from the cruise, she has this man young enough to be her child. This predator, has got her arm around her, and we said, "Who is this?" Then she said, "Oh, it's just me and Schmeezy." Schmeezy is what she called him. And he introduced himself as Richard and then said he had to go and that his Lambo was waiting for him. So we took our mother aside. That was our first time meeting him. And then Mom tried to set up a dinner with us and Schmeezy, or Schmierer, and he canceled twice on us. And then it wasn't really until the wedding that I had an actual conversation with him.
Okay. Let's talk about that conversation at the wedding, because what I understand that at the wedding you had a discussion with Richard and your mother about a marriage contract. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. I mean, let me just say this. I mean, we found out about this wedding a week before it was to occur. I mean, they have the cruise in July, and then they're getting married in September. Zelda and I had our concerns, and so we came with this. I prepared a marriage contract based on my discussions with my mother about her estate planning, and so the marriage contract really just embodied those discussions. So, I mean, she wasn't surprised with the marriage contract. Richard was the one who was surprised.
Okay, well, before you tell me that, elaborate for me about the estate plan. You said you were familiar with your mother's estate plan at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, our mother was she was very meticulous about the finances, always at Schmata Mart. I mean, she was working on those margins. I mean, it was Schmata's, and she was actually very resistant to the silk push due to the high margins. But she was meticulous on finances, and she always told us, what I'm doing with my money is I'm giving it to you and Zelda, and that's what I want. And so, she said she would never allow a stranger to the family to get the money. And so she always told me that. And so when I did this marriage contract, I knew that's what she wanted.
Okay, and on their wedding day, which was the 4th of September, you met with Richard and your mother. And how was your mother that day?
You know what? She looked like she was a shell of herself again. I mean, she did not seem happy. And I think it was because, she realized that Schmierer had hoodwinked her.
How was Richard? How did he appear that day?
Oh, he was really happy. He was really happy.
You presented to them this marriage contract.
Yeah.
And tell me about your discussion that you had with the two of them at that time.
Well, I think my mother was relieved because, there was a total change on her face. It went from kind of this look of, I don't know what I'm getting into. She was a bit happier and I think relieved by the whole proposition. Whereas Richard, on the other hand, it looked like I had pulled a steak out of his mouth.
Did you meet with your mother alone to review the marriage contract?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a family law lawyer.
And how long did you spend with your mom?
It's hard to tell. There was a lot going on that day. It all happened, it must have been half an hour. It was between the chazan's tish, and the actual wedding. And so there was a limited time span in there, but I satisfied myself that my mother understood the context of the marriage contract.
And what about Richard? Did Richard have somebody explain the agreement to him?
Yeah, you know what? Shlomo was there, and you got to hear this. So, we meet Richard, this European soccer player, and he's like, you know what? I invited my friend Shlomo, and he's a family law lawyer, and I should consult him about this marriage contract. And I was like, Gavaldic. I mean, that was terrific, right? We could put Shlomo there, and
really only understanding like half of
okay,
what
I'm
you're
sorry,
saying,
that's
but
like fantastic, right? It's fantastic. I mean, we were a very Hamish Eastern European family, close-knit, okay? So Yiddish just comes and goes. That's how we were raised, and that's what Mom would have wanted. So, but going forward, Richard was there with Shlomo, and Shlomo was happy to provide assistance as his lawyer.
Okay, did you and Shlomo have any discussions between yourselves with respect to this agreement?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, a ton about financial disclosure, in fact.
Okay, tell me about those discussions about financial disclosure.
Well, we were blown away because Richard knew everything about Mom's assets. I mean...
Objection. This is hearsay. My understanding is they don't intend to call this Mr. Shlomo.
overruled.
I was there, okay? I was there. I mean, this is just, Anyway, so... Richard was, I thought, pretty knowledgeable. I mean, knew about Mom, about the Bentley. I mean, after Dad died, we never took that Bentley out. And then there was a discussion and kind of a ruckus between Shlomo and Richard about the financial disclosure section in the marriage contract.
Again, I'm sorry?
There was a ruckus. There was loud noise between Shlomo and Richard about the financial disclosure. There was, the standard, Shlomo wanted there to be a list of assets and their values with the marriage contract, and Richard said he didn't need it. Richard said, I know what she's worth, and I don't care about the money, and I love her, and I'm not worried about this marriage contract.
Tell me about the marriage. Richard and Yenta were married for 5 years.
Yeah.
How were they together as a couple?
I'm going to have to try to separate my own feelings here. I think, my mom was happier than she was after my dad died. There wasn't turbulence that I could see. I think my mom was happy. I hope she was happy.
How did they keep their finances?
Oh, totally separate. My mother took a calculator wherever she went. It honestly reminded me of that Seinfeld episode in Boca Vista where they were all about the calculators and the percentages. That's what my mother was doing. They'd go to a restaurant. Richard, how much are you going to pay on the bill? And she would try to keep it 50-50. I know they had separate bank accounts, and I just always remember the calculator.
Now, I understand that the shares in Shmatamar were transferred to you and your sister at some point.
Yeah.
Can you please tell me about that?
Yeah, it was. So I'm going to try to be quick here with alacrity. It was November 14th, November 11th, 2014, and basically our mom told us she was putting her estate plan into fruition and like she said she would, taking care of us, Zelda and I, and providing for us in the will, and she wanted to give us Shmatamart. And I encouraged her to also, provide for Shmir, and, she did. She got a life insurance policy for $1 million, naming him beneficiary, and she did these share certificates, and I know I have to be quick. Judge has golf, putt-putt, but the way it was done with the share certificates is she signed them over to Zelda and I, And from that point onward, Zelda made all the decisions with the business.
Well, just one or two more questions. At
How
that
about
time,
one?
Okay,
one
sorry.
more.
Yeah.
At that time, how was their marriage?
It was fine. I mean, fine. There was no arguments, nothing. No, it was fine. I mean, there was no trouble in paradise.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Honor. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Holbaum. Zidlowski?
Morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Schmutta.
Good morning.
So I understand that you're a lawyer
Yeah, yes,
called to the Bar of Ontario,
I hope so.
and your area of practice is matrimonial litigation in general family law,
Yes,
and you've been engaged in that practice for many years.
yes,
You have significant experience specifically in matters involving family law, such as prenuptial agreements.
I am a certified specialist.
Now, in that case, you'll agree with me, you advise clients on the enforceability of prenuptial agreements,
Yes,
and you also draft them.
yes,
And in fact, your evidence is that you drafted the prenuptial agreement for your mother in advance of her marriage to Richard Schmier.
yes,
I understand that your mother and Mr. Schmier were married on September 4th of 2009, is that correct?
yeah, terrible day.
Well, you attended the wedding.
Yeah, I had to.
You had a close relationship with your mother.
Yes, yes, I did.
So you'll agree that you knew about the date of the wedding well in advance.
Well, he met her in July.
Married in September.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 months there, and he canceled 2 meetings with us. So, I mean, I was really flabbergasted.
But you'll agree with me, your mother didn't have this wedding without telling you about it in advance.
I got an invitation. I mean, she alluded to her and Mr. Schmier becoming closer, and then we got the wedding invitation. I was surprised.
So it was important to your mother that you attend the wedding.
Yes,
It was important that she have your support,
yes,
to have your approval.
yes,
Now, you knew about your mother's relationship with Mr. Schmier. She didn't keep it a secret from you.
no, she
obviously.
did not.
And you knew about their wedding plans at Casa Loma. You got the invitation in the mail.
Yes, I did.
But I understand that you waited until the day of the wedding to present the prenuptial agreement to your mother and Mr. Schmier.
I mean, this was always based on my mother's intentions. I was concerned about what was going on here. I mean, 2 months, this was a shotgun wedding.
Well, Mr. Schmutta, my question was that you waited until the day of the wedding in order to present this prenuptial agreement to your mother and Mr. Schmier. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, you waited until only 2 hours before the start of the wedding to show it to them.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you'll agree with me that your mother never asked you to prepare a prenuptial agreement for her.
Well, it was in her eyes.
And Mr. Schmier never asked you to prepare the agreement.
No, I mean, he looked, again, like I had pulled the steak out of his mouth.
He was shocked, wasn't he?
Steak.
He was shocked that you presented this agreement, isn't it true?
Shocked. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess, yeah.
Now, am I correct that you prepared this prenuptial agreement because you wanted to protect your mother's assets from Mr. Schmier?
Well, I wanted to do what my mom always wanted, and she always said she did not want a stranger to the family to get the assets of our family's estate.
And if she made that comment to you, I put it to you, it was before she met Mr. Schmier. Isn't that true?
You know, it could be. It could be.
But the fact is, you prepared the prenuptial agreement because you didn't want Mr. Schmier to have any claim to your mother's assets.
I would disagree with that. I did it because I knew that's what my mom wanted, and she wanted to protect the schmatas. I mean, she was all about the schmatas. And this guy never worked in the schmata business. He didn't know the polyester from the silk, from the wool. He didn't know shotness. I mean, this guy did not know schmatas.
But you and your sister, you two know schmatas.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had to leave the schmata business and go into law. That's how badly I wanted to get out of schmatas. I mean, anyway.
You might have wanted to get out of schmatas, but you wanted to protect your ownership interest in Schmatamart. Isn't that the case?
Well, yeah, I like, I mean, as much as I got out, I do still like schmatas.
And you wanted to protect your future interest in Schmatamart from Mr. Schmier.
Well, I mean, that's putting, though, the cart before the horse. I mean, first, mom is my concern. And yeah, there's this issue about ownership. You know, I did care about schmatas, but I mean, I cared about mom also.
Now, when you drafted the prenuptial agreement, you included provisions whereby Mr. Schmier would release his claims under the Family Law Act.
Yeah. You better believe it.
And also his claims under the Succession Law Reform Act.
Oh yeah, saw this coming.
And you also included a provision acknowledging that Mr. Schmier had independent legal advice.
Yeah, you did.
Now, isn't it true that you did that at a time when you had no idea whether Mr. Schmier would have legal advice?
Well, I would have never had him execute that agreement if he didn't have a lawyer there. And Shlomo was there.
And up until 2 hours before the wedding, I put it to you, you had no idea that Shlomo or any other lawyer knowledgeable to Mr. Schmier would be at the wedding. Isn't that true?
I mean, it was a scramble, but as my, as my colleagues always tell me, you can't get an omelet unless you're willing to, scramble some eggs.
And speaking of scrambling some eggs, isn't it true that you told, along with your sister, you told your mother that you would never accept their marriage unless they signed the prenup?
It was an emotional time for me. I think that might have been said, yes.
Well, in fact, those specific words are contained in the agreed statement of facts. You recall reviewing the agreed statement of facts?
Yeah, I said it, okay? Yes, you're right.
All right. Now, you knew, as you've already testified, that it was important to your mother to have your support. You recall testifying to that?
Yes.
You knew that it was important to her that she have your approval. You recall testifying to that?
Yes.
And 2 hours before the wedding, you tell her that she will not have your approval unless she signs that prenuptial agreement.
Yes, but that's what she wanted. So, I mean, that's my answer. She was so happy when I came with that prenup. I mean, you should have seen her.
Well, you've said a couple of times that's what she wanted, and you say that it was because of what was in her eyes?
Well, and she was she was like looking really like a ghost, and then I show her the prenup and she's like, oh, okay. And so when they breathe that sigh of relief, you know. And I knew she cared about schmatas, and I knew she knew that we cared about schmatas.
Just to, we just have a couple minutes, I think. Is there any other ground that you want to cover besides the marriage agreement?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we can move to that right now?
All right. The disclosure of assets is an important part of the marriage agreement. I think I need to cover that, Your
Great,
Honor.
if you can do that quickly, please.
All right. You never asked your mother what she knew about Mr. Schmier's assets?
I mean, it was a complex question because he always was telling us how rich he was and how much money he had, and he drove a Lamborghini. So, I mean, she saw the Lamborghini, and and he said he had a lot of money, so I had no issue,
Now, you drafted the prenuptial agreement, and you were familiar with the Schedule A.
Yes.
The Schedule A was your mother's obligation to complete. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
To list all of her financial assets?
Yes, but Schmier knew her assets better than she did.
You never spoke to Mr. Schmier about her assets?
Well, when we were going through it, he was like, and don't forget the Bentley, I know about that Bentley. And I when I heard that comment, I was like, how do you know that? And he's like, because I'm the schmear man. And after that, I mean, it didn't continue much.
Mr. Schmutta,
Yes.
you'll agree with me that your mother did not fill out the Schedule A list of assets.
There was an oral discussion. There was an oral list. That's how I'd put it.
Your mother did not make any disclosure in writing of her assets.
In writing,
Isn't that
no.
correct?
Yeah, in writing.
And you drafted this agreement. You included the Schedule A provision. You agree with that?
Yes.
And if you turn to the agreement, under financial disclosure, it says in paragraph 15B sub I of the agreed statement of facts, each party has fully and completely disclosed to the other the nature, extent, and probable value of all of his or her significant assets and all of his or her significant debts or other liabilities existing at the date of this contract. You recall including those terms?
Absolutely.
And you had your mother sign the agreement without providing any of that information within the agreement.
She did orally.
Your evidence is that she did orally. Were you there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a crucial time at this wedding junction.
Were you here for Mr. Schmear's evidence in chief?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I was.
And you were here for your lawyer's cross-examination of Mr. Schmear?
Listen, you could have excluded me, okay? You're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer also. You could have sought that order. You didn't. So yes, I was heard here and I heard it all.
And you'll agree with me that Mr. Schmear was not asked any questions about any financial disclosure made by your mother?
Well, you know, we did the best we could.
Now, you, being a matrimonial litigation lawyer, would have explained to your mother the importance of making full financial disclosure?
Yeah, she got it.
You explained to her that the entire contract could be set aside if she did not make financial disclosure?
Yes.
And despite your advice, your mother left the financial disclosure blank.
Again, blank written, but orally, it was all there. And Richard, knew it better than my mom did.
Now, you say that your mother's response to the obligation was, quote, Richard loves me and does not really care to know the extent of my assets. It is none of his business anyway.
Well, I mean, I do believe Mom believed that Richard loved him. Again, I think this was a very emotional time, and so I don't think that note reflects what happened. I mean, they discussed assets. Richard was like, don't forget that, and I know about this, and is there more? And I just...
Well, Mr.
yeah.
Schmutta,
Yeah.
you agree that you put a note in your file saying exactly what I just
Yes,
read
yes,
out.
I did.
Now, you'll agree with me that that is inconsistent with your evidence today, which is not contained in any agreed statement of facts, that her financial assets were discussed with Mr. Schmear.
Inconsistent's a word of art. I mean, yeah, there's that note, but there's my oral testimony.
And your oral testimony, you'll agree with me, is not supported by the agreed statement of facts.
I don't think the agreed statement of facts discusses the oral disclosure.
Is there any other grounds? I just got another call. Court of Appeal apparently, their docket is collapsed and they're free. So
right.
Can we get moving?
Very well, Your Honor. Your mother passed away while on a cruise ship with Mr. Schmear.
Yes.
And that was after being married for almost 6 years.
I think it was 5, but yes.
Now, you became aware that in front of several witnesses, while suffering a heart attack, that your mother expressed her wish that Mr. Schmear have the shares of Schmuttemark.
I don't know. I mean,
How
I
is
wasn't
this
there.
witness going to answer that question?
I wasn't there.
I asked if he is aware that other witnesses have said.
I'm aware of the
enough.
allegation.
All right. Now, you say that those shares belong to you and your sister?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was already given to us. I mean, we she signed them over. She said, "Here, you can hold the certificate," and then our mom wanted to store it, so she stored it.
So you are agreeing that your mother never gave you possession of the share certificates?
I mean, there was this signing, so she signed it, and she's like, I just went to the lawyers, we had a Shabbos dinner, and she's like, here's the shares, and she shows that it's signed, and then Zelda, touched it and looked at it, and then she's like, I'll keep it in safekeeping. And I remember being really annoyed because it was Shabbos and she presented the share certificates, and that's muksa. I mean, that's forbidden on Shabbos to discuss business like that, so yes.
In any event,
She took it back.
She took it back. You never saw them again.
Correct.
And your mother, she kept those share certificates in her possession.
Yeah, but we knew where they were.
She even traveled with the share certificates.
She was really into securing and safety, and so she took them wherever she went.
And you're aware that she told Mr. Schmier exactly how to take possession of the share certificates himself.
I wasn't there, okay? I was not there at that unfortunate time on the cruise when my mother had a heart attack. I was not there.
You're aware of Mr. Schmier's medical condition?
No, you know what? I'm aware because of these proceedings, but I wasn't aware before these proceedings.
Well, you're aware that Mr. Schmier has been seeking support from your mother's estate?
Yeah.
That was no surprise to you?
No, that was no surprise to me.
And you acknowledge that the financial disclosure he made in his Form 13 is accurate?
I mean, I don't know how I'm going to know if it's accurate or not. I mean, he swore, but he is a predator.
All right.
Is that the name of his team that he used to play for, the Predators?
I think it was,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Your Honor, those are my questions.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Mr. Slavsky.
Thank you.
All right. I'm looking forward to closing arguments.